I know I just made a recap video for the Oscars, but I will continue putting out Oscar coverage videos talking about the remaining categories I haven't talked about yet, but I will finally also go back to reviewing movies that I watched in theaters starting all the way back in January this year, so let's start off with this one. Birdman is directed by Alejandro Gonzalez Iñárritu, co-written by him, Nicholas Jacobone, Alexander Dinlaris Jr., and Armando Bo, and stars Michael Keaton, Edward Norton, Emma Stone, Naomi Watts, Zach Galifianakis, Andrea Riseborough, and Amy Ryan. And Birdman is about this guy, Regan Thompson, played by Michael Keaton, who's this washed out Hollywood actor who became famous back then for playing the superhero, but he turned down the deal. Now he's pretty much irrelevant in the scene. But now he's trying to kind of revitalize his career by putting up this Broadway play, by directing it, writing it, and starring in it. And along the way, he has to deal with his ego and the people around him who kind of threaten to turn his production into a flop, and as well as the voice of Birdman, which he continues to hear in his head. And Birdman is one of those movies that we in the Philippines only really get after the Metro Manila Film Festival every December, because we only get like these big Oscar caliber movies like after Christmas during the start of the new year, which is kind of good because the first few months of every year, instead of being filled with like bad movies, we do get a lot of Oscar movies too. What's cool though is that Birdman was actually screened twice here. Like after it won Best Picture at the Oscars, it got screened again for like a week, so that's really cool. And I'm very glad it got that chance because I can't find anything that I don't love about Birdman. I think this movie is incredible. Everything from the cinematography to the music to the writing to the acting, with the stellar performance by Michael Keaton and the directing from Alejandro Gonzalez Iñárritu. Now, the big thing that you may have heard about Birdman, if you still haven't seen it yet, is that the entire thing is made to look like one shot. Now, take note though that this is not the first time it's ever been done. It's been done many times before, but this is probably the most mainstream this technique has gotten in recent years. But I don't think it's just a gimmick. I think the way this technique is put to use in this movie, it actually really helps give this movie this sense of restlessness all throughout it. There's this sense of claustrophobia also, and this tension that just stays there the entire time as it just follows characters walking around. And what it does also is that there's no disconnect among characters. They all feel like they're part of the same story, and there's something in the movie about how Regan keeps kind of hallucinating stuff, and the fact that the camera never cuts. Like it really blurs the line between reality and this fictional life he's imagining. But even if this camera is moving around all the time, the lighting and the coloring are always super vivid. The images are never out of focus as the camera constantly moves and shifts, and the camera doesn't just stay on the ground. This camera goes like to really crazy angles and whatnot. It's always so enthralling to watch. And what's cool is that all the sets in the movie are made to look like they're one big set. So it really just feels like a dollhouse of sorts. Every single room is connected to each other. And again, there's no division between reality and Regan's kind of personality on stage, because as he goes on stage to rehearse and leaves the stage, again, there's no cut there, so it really does begin to blur the lines. And yes, this movie doesn't have the best visual effects ever out there, but for me it kind of works because you know that Regan is kind of cuckoo up there, so it kind of makes sense that the visual effects don't look that polished in my opinion. And Birdman has better sound than you might expect. In the sense that whenever they're walking through hallways or streets or stuff, these places are constantly bustling with noise and conversation that you can really kind of hear very crisply as if they're just around the corner. But the great thing also about the sound is the score. The musical score shifts between from classical pieces to like this really intense like drum only score. And I think the metaphor here is pretty clear in the sense that the story really is just shifting between Regan's illusions of grandeur and like the harsh reality of the chaos of his real life, which is symbolized by the drums, which are like uncoordinated and all over the place. The great thing also about the editing in this movie is that it seamlessly masks the transitions and cuts throughout this entire 2-hour runtime. It's obvious when they cut. Like there are certain moments when the camera suddenly goes dark, or when they do a time lapse kind of thing. That those are obviously cuts, but the important thing is that momentum is never ever lost. And the constantly moving pace made the movie feel like 2.5 hours long to me. Like this movie felt much longer than it did, but I mean that in a very good way because there was just so much happening, and I was just in tuned with everything that's happening. The movie is actually just under 2 hours long, and the sheer number of themes being tackled in this movie, I think that's like the point of where people might be disagreeing about the movie. Some people might think it's too much and it's too all over the place, which it kind of is, and for me that's kind of the point. But for me at least, yeah, like I was not turned off at all by the sheer number of themes being tackled, and I really enjoyed the chaos of it all. Like I really think it did work. The dialogue throughout the movie is really, really abrasive and honest. Like everyone's kind of angry all the time. And what's great about the dialogue is that there's certain lines that are repeated, especially lines from the play that Reagan is putting up. And these lines constantly shift meaning as they're repeated. And I found all the characters to be extremely well defined, or at least very distinct from each other. And this movie has characters that I viewed the characters as representations of the different themes being tackled, or at least different angles to those themes. And in terms of plot, Birdman doesn't have that much of a story. It's really more of a character study about Regan, which is completely fine with me. So that when you reach the ending of the movie, which does not necessarily tie up every single loose end, for me, don't be so disappointed because it really is more of a character study in my opinion. And talking about the acting, which is fantastic all across the board, I want to start off first with the supporting cast. First of all, this is my first time really seeing Zach Galifianakis in a dramatic role, and I was very pleasantly surprised. I thought he was great. In fact, his character is the most level-headed character in the entire movie. He plays the role with lots of conviction, with just the right amount of bitterness under it. And what's great about the cast of Birdman is that there's a lot of women in it, and all the women do a great job, especially Emma Stone, who got her Oscar nomination probably solely from her scene where she shouts at Regan. But her performance is more than that scene, I think. Like she really does play her character very well throughout the movie. And Edward Norton, of course, like is fantastic. He's equal parts really, really funny and really despicable. Like you grow to hate this guy so much, but he's still kind of likable. And it's great that he was game to play like a caricature of himself. But of course, this is Michael Keaton's show, and I think he is absolutely spectacular. Like he's on another level here. For me, his performance here is just a performance for the ages because he goes through the entire emotional spectrum so well. Like he just slides in and out of emotions, and you still believe it's all coming from one character, and he plays it with so much honesty. Like it's not a showy performance in the sense that it feels like he's trying to get nominated for an Oscar. Like there's a lot of restraint also with his performance. And the great thing about how Alejandro Gonzalez Iñárritu directs his movie is that he really stages the entire thing like a play, in that things are constantly happening, but he really knows how to point the audience towards the things he wants us to pay attention to, like amid all the disorder. And he really does use the one-shot gimmick really, really well. And I realize that's something a lot of people will disagree with, but it's a love it or hate it thing. And this movie is most definitely self-indulgent in the sense that this has his fingerprints all over it, but I'm completely fine with it because it's extremely entertaining and it's extremely well crafted. So in the end, I can't really find anything negative to say about Birdman, in my opinion. At least I think it's an amazing movie. If you still haven't seen it, like now's the time. Like go ahead and watch it. It's great. It's really weird though, so I understand if you don't like it that much because it's really a weird kind of all over the place movie. But I remember just sitting in the theater in awe after I watched it. It's really, really something. Alright, so those are my thoughts on Birdman. Have you guys seen it? What do you think about it? Did you love it? Did you hate it? Whatever you thought, whether you agree with me or not, please leave me a comment. Let's have a conversation.